This right here is the Sony FX2. And in this video, we're going to go through my thoughts around working with this camera and actually using it in a real world setting. So a quick disclosure, Sony sent me this camera for 2 weeks to try out for free, and it was just a loaner, so I had to ship it back to them. So I don't have the camera here, but I have footage working with the camera. And so this is going to be my thoughts around the Sony FX2 and why it's actually a camera that I personally am interested in, and some of the things that I really like about this camera, and then some of the things that maybe I don't like about this camera. So we're going to get into all of that, and I'm going to show you a bunch of footage when I was in Minneapolis shooting for one of my client jobs. And so I used this camera for both on set during that client job shoot, but also every day when we were done filming, I would go out in the city and we would try to just shoot footage walking around and really just test this camera in kind of a run and gun vlog style setting. Now, I shot all of my A-roll already, and I also shot a whole vlog, and I messed up my audio. You can see right here on this clip, I was using the Sony M1 microphone, but right here I had the polar pattern set up to record from behind camera. So I basically lost all the audio because of user error. But, you know, sometimes things like this happen. We're not all perfect, and sometimes we make mistakes. So let's just talk about the elephant in the room, which is, why is this camera even made in the first place? You know, the FX3 is one of the, best cameras that Sony has put out. Small, compact cinema camera, awesome sensor. And so a lot of creators were really hoping for a new version of this camera when they heard like a new FX camera was coming out. But the FX2 is like a step below. And so what is the thinking behind Sony in putting out this camera that's actually a step lower than, say, the FX3? And here's what I think. This camera is definitely geared towards creators who are really getting into filmmaking and they want to start their journey. And it's also just a useful B camera for creators who might have something like an FX6 or an FX3 or one of the bigger cameras out there. It also is perfect for travel and adventure documentary or just like travel and adventure vlog content. And I'll get into that more in this video, but it's definitely catered towards those who want a cheaper camera but have all of the cinema features, because you basically have a cinema body, you have a cinema layout, you have a cinema setup in the menus, but then it's also a hybrid camera. And one thing that was really interesting, I was doing a talking to a group of kids who are all Sony users, and they had in front of their table a Sony FX6, an FX3, A7S3s. And the one thing a lot of them asked me was, have I tried the FX2? Like, they were super interested in the FX2 because from their perspective, they want a good hybrid camera that is a cinema camera. So it has a good sensor for both photo and video, but then it's also a good cinema camera. So that's kind of where this FX2 sits. It's an introductory cinema camera. It's also a solid hybrid camera, and it's also priced well where that it becomes more of an introductory camera rather than having to go out and spend more money for the FX3 or the FX6 if you do want a full-fledged cinema camera. But what makes it cinema? There's a few specific things that make this more of a cinema-first camera. The big thing is the body design. Let's talk about this button layout because it's cool. What we've got going on here is that it's a cinema camera. So you got iris, white balance, ISO right on the top with a big record button. You can use your trigger as a record button. And you got a zoom feature right here. So if you have a servo lens, well, you can do that. Or if you use clear image zoom, you can zoom as well. On the back, you've got movie and still mode, which is pretty cool. So with this, you can have movie or stills. So it's an actual hybrid, easy to switch. You have this new home button, which when you click this, it looks like a Sony Venice or some other cinema camera. It has all your information that you would want when you're out filming. Like, it's pretty cool to have that. And you can hit that at any point, even when you're recording, and it just pops up all your data. You know, you got your peaking, your zebras, your shutters. It's got basically everything, except for doesn't have waveforms, doesn't have false color. There's a handful of things that Sony really needs to start putting in their cameras, and that's any camera that Sony has. You have to get up to like the FX6 to be able to start getting waveforms in your camera. This is a cinema camera, should have waveforms. I use it all the time. One other cool thing, so check this out. So I'm filming, I'm like, yeah, but let's say I want to do vertical. Switch to vertical. Check this out. All the display turns vertical. So here's horizontal, and I flip it to vertical, and now everything is readable from a vertical layout. And then when you go to edit, your footage is automatically rotated. That's not really new, but this whole layout, everything that they've done is a little bit of a step up from previous models. Also, 2 quarter 20s on the bottom, which makes it awesome to hook to bigger tripods. I mean, I just need the one because I got this little tiny tripod. And the big thing, the new addition with this camera is you have a full EVF. And this EVF, for me, was one of the biggest reasons why I was so interested in the FX2. Because I made a video a little while ago. When I went to Rwanda for a Sony project, I took with me the A7C2. Now, the A7C2 is the same sensor that is in the FX2. It's also the same sensor that's in the A7 IV. So Sony likes to use the same sensor and change out the body styles, and each one has kind of a different goal, like a different person in mind. The FX2 is video first, but someone who also wants a hybrid shooter. Now, when the A7C2 came out, I made a video saying that this is a great little option for a mini cinema camera. However, there's these weird quirks. And there's a few things that I mentioned in that video that are all solved with the FX2. And so the big thing when I was working with the A7C2 when I was in Rwanda is that you have this small compact body with a little EVF that's perfect for run and gun style of shooting, documentary style. You have all the bells and whistles of Sony's autofocus and stabilization, but then the body was almost too small. Like that camera is very much geared towards, small photography, like pack it in your bag, make it simple to kind of carry with you wherever you go. Whereas the FX2 fixes a lot of the problems. And one of those big things is the hand grip. On the FX2, you have this deep hand grip. So when you hold it, there's no chance that you're going to be able to drop this camera. Also, when you hold it, your pinky's not coming off. With the A7C2, you had to buy this additional plate to make it a little bit taller to make it so that it felt like a bigger camera. Like that camera is small, compact for a reason. It's supposed to be a travel, tiny, lightweight camera. But this camera fixes that, has the full deep grip, and it has a full viewfinder. So when you're looking through the viewfinder on the FX2, it feels more like a video camera because it has enough distance away from the camera body itself that you're not pressing your cheek or your face against the camera. Like when you hold it up, it feels nice. It's like a director's viewfinder. And one of the case uses that Sony said that this camera is going to be used for is for directors to have a portable viewfinder where you can put on different lenses and be able to see through the camera, what kind of shots they're going to get before they, work with something big like the Venice to actually get the shot. However, that viewfinder for me is like one of the things I've been asking for Sony for so long. When we go do these Sony condo trips every year, we get to talk with engineers. And I've been able to go to a few of these trips now. And one of the things I always ask for is a viewfinder. Like that's something that I always want in a Sony camera, is a dedicated viewfinder that actually sticks out and feels like a video first viewfinder. Right. You want me to talk about the eyepiece again? I love the eyepiece. Look, it's flippy. Some people will think it's annoying because it sticks out. It's never going to go in, you can't take it off. However, I haven't had an issue with it. When you're working with like the A9 III, which is what I'm shooting on right now, it's that standard Sony body that has the viewfinder at top. It's good, but the FX2 viewfinder is so much better because it sticks out away from the camera and the experience makes it feel more like a video camera. So for me personally, that was a huge thing where I'm like, I want this viewfinder on future cameras. Like I want the A9 III in this body. Like that would be an exceptional camera. There is one thing though with the A9 III that the FX2 doesn't have, and that's the tilty flippy screen. So on the FX2, you only have a flip out screen. So it's something that you'd find on like the A7S III, the ZV-E1. It's got just the standard swing out and tilt screen. However, with the A9 III, which is the camera that I use for most of my stuff now, it has that tilty flippy screen, which comes in handy all the time, especially when I'm doing gimbal work. So that is one downside with the FX2 is you just have a little bit less of a screen than you find on the higher end cameras in Sony. But this is a cheaper camera. It's not necessarily supposed to solve every problem for every creator. But what I find so interesting is Sony does still pack all of the new features into the FX2. So it's got the fastest autofocus that Sony delivers. It's also got the best stabilization. So you have active and you have dynamic active, which allows you to get that super smooth gimbal-like stabilization when you're handheld. A lot of these shots, I was flipping between dynamic active, or even standard, and I switch between them whenever I shoot, just because they're all useful in different cases. Now, one of the big things I wanted to test when working with the FX2 was really test it in a real world setting. So I was shooting for a client in Minneapolis. And on this project, I was using a mix of handheld, tripod, and gimbal work. And gimbal was one thing I was really interested with the FX2. Because of that viewfinder, it sticks out the back, I wanted to see if there was any limitations with that. And when I mounted this on my RS4 Pro, I didn't find any issues. Like, it was very easy to balance, and even like moving the gimbal up and down and all around, like that viewfinder really had no issue. The bigger thing was the flip out screen for gimbal work, because you either have to have the screen flat against the back of the camera, or you have to have it flipped out if you want an angle on it. Whereas when I work with my A9 III, I can tilt it from the back, which actually makes it a lot more useful for gimbal work. Now, if you're wondering, on top of the FX2, I was using a wireless transmission because client wanted to see what I was shooting. So I was basically mounting this with a wireless transmitter. I was just using the screen. And because of Sony's autofocus, I was able to just rely on the autofocus to get my shots and not have to worry about seeing all the detail, making sure I'm always in focus on exactly what I want. I think that's one of the coolest things with Sony's autofocus in the last few years, is that I've been able to rely on it more and more. And so when I have people looking at a big screen in the other side of the room, oftentimes I'll have, someone else looking and just making sure that my focus is hitting, exactly where I need it to. But I can rely on the autofocus, even on these client jobs, to be razor sharp, shooting at shallow, depth of field. And it grabs exactly what I need it to when I have the settings set up right. It's just something that's made it a lot easier for me to do this kind of gimbal work when I'm moving quick around fitness people and like working with different fitness clients. Because that's one of the things I do outside of YouTube, is I work with a lot of fitness. Now, one other thing on the body that I really like is that the input for your audio and your headphones is down on the bottom, and they're outside any flap doors. So you don't have to like open a flap door to be able to get to these. And it's easy to use that way. Also, with the HDMI, it's higher up so that when you flip out the screen, it's not in the way. So Sony was intentional with the placement of these different ports so that when you're actually using it with an external monitor, or like I was using it with a wireless, it makes it so that you just don't have any limitations with that screen. Now, for card slots, you get 2 on this camera. Both are SD card slots, but the top one also accepts CFast-A cards, which are more robust cards and the ones I personally like to use when I'm out filming. Now, a few other things that really stand out with the FX2, one is that you have shutter angle. So with all of cinema cameras, you now have shutter angle, which is not really the biggest deal breaker in the world, but it does make it feel more like a cinema experience. Like my A9 III doesn't have shutter angle, but the FX2 does. And then another thing that the Sony has added into the FX2 is the Big 6 menu that shows all of your settings that you need to know when you're shooting video. It's the same type of menu that you're going to find on something like the FX6 or even up to the Venice. Like, all of Sony's professional cinema cameras have a very similar experience so that you can switch from one to the other, and it's all integrated and it feels like you could really jump between the cameras. Now, one other feature that I think is super important with the FX2 is they've added a dual native ISO of both 800 and 4000. So if you know what dual native ISO, that's basically where the image is going to be the cleanest with the least amount of noise. And on the FX6, FX3, A7S III, ZVE1, you have a dual native ISO of 800 and 12,800, which is amazing, and which that sensor is so good because it's great for low light. However, sometimes it's almost too much low light. And that's why I like that Sony chose the dual native ISO for this sensor to be 800 and 4000, because I just feel like 4000 is very usable, and working in that 4000 range is oftentimes, an ISO that you're going to use in lower light situations. Rolling shutter tests. Now let's talk about one of the other things that I've heard creators complain about, and that is 4K 60. So when you're shooting on the FX2, you only have 4K 30 at the full sensor width. When you jump up to 4K 60 to get some slow motion, well, you crop in 1.5 times. It's the same thing that happens on the A7 IV and the A7C II. The same limitation. It's just a limitation of this sensor that Sony chose for the FX2. Now, it's something that definitely bothers me, especially when I'm used to working with the A7S III to the ZVE1 to the FX6 to now the A9 III. Like, I don't have that limitation, and I can go all the way up to 4K 120 in all those cameras. On the FX2, you can only go 4K 60, and then if you want 120, you have to bump it down to 1080p. However, when you're shooting in 1080p, it does give you the full width of the sensor. So you can get the full width of the sensor without cropping in if you bump it down to 1080 and shoot 60 or 120. So that's one of the limitations of this camera. And you can see on the screen here, I've been showing you some of the footage that I got shooting in 1080p, shooting at 120 frames per second, just so you could get a sense of what the footage looks like. And I think this is a great time to kind of talk about the state of cameras and the state of YouTube and just everything that's going on with the tools that we're using, because there's a lot of creators out there that like to complain about these features without actually using the cameras or actually using them for what their intended purpose is. And one of the things that I think just has happened in the last few years is that every camera is good. No matter what camera you pick up that's more recent, every camera is going to get you a good image. It's going to get you great looking video. You're going to be able to shoot the project that you want. And if you publish it here on YouTube or even work with your clients, they're not going to know the difference between, any range of these cameras. On this project, when I was working in Minneapolis, I was shooting side by side with the FX2 and the A9 III, and nobody can really tell a difference between the shots. Like, I integrated the footage between the two shots in all the videos, using them side by side, and it all looks great. And that's because just sensors in general and cameras in general have just gotten so good where it doesn't matter which camera you pick up. All cameras are going to be good. What matters is how you're using it and what features that you need to make the videos that you're going to create. I don't know if you've been following Ryan Trahan's series on YouTube, 50 States in 50 Days, but he's using an iPhone for everything that he's doing. And it looks fine. Like, it gets the point across. It tells the story. It's easy for him to get in this flow of shooting videos every day using a smartphone. And with that, he's getting millions of views with every video. So the tool doesn't matter. What matters is how you use the tool and how the tool can help benefit you for the kind of videos that you're creating. For me personally, even here on YouTube, I prefer working with a Sony A9 III or the FX2 when I was playing around with it for this video, because I just like the form factor of that style of camera and I like the lenses that I work with. But that doesn't mean that the videos that I make are going to be any better than someone who's working with any other camera. Last few videos I've shot on this channel, I've just used my DJI Action 5. It just depends on what you're creating and what you need to make that video. So when this camera was first announced, I saw there was a lot of just negative feedback. And the big thing is, if you're someone who's complaining about these features, then this camera is not for you. Because when I pick up the FX2, I'm excited. That viewfinder to me is such a huge improvement for video creators who want to go out and shoot adventure videos. Right here, this is some footage I was shooting in Rwanda with the A7C2. So same sensor, I could get the same looking images out of this camera. However, it would have been so much easier to shoot this footage had I had the FX2 at that time, because of the viewfinder in these bright, sunny locations and shooting on location and run and gun. I think the FX2 is a solid camera. And for me personally, it might be something I'll consider bringing with me when I am doing another one of these projects when I'm in bright sunlight and I want a viewfinder that I can stick up to my face like this. Now, some of you are wondering, how do you stick this in a camera bag? Well, when I stuck it in my camera bag to Minneapolis, I just put my microphone right against the back of it, and then it became more of a solid chunk that goes into the camera case. So you just got to get a little bit creative because it does stick out and it does leave some space behind it, but it's not that big. Now, would I get this camera? And that's an interesting question. So this camera is available soon. The time of recording this video, it's not quite available yet. It was announced a little while ago. And I've been deciding if I want to buy this when it comes out or not. On the one hand, it's a super awesome cinema tool. And the camera that I would be replacing is my ZV-E1. And I really like my ZV-E1 because it's like a stripped down version of my bigger cameras. It's got a great sensor. It's got that low light capability. However, the FX2, I just feel like is such a better camera for shooting videos and shooting documentaries because the viewfinder, the dual native ISO, and just the form factor, being able to use this in a run and gun setting is going to be so much easier than the ZV-E1, which is what I currently use for kind of run and gun documentary stuff. And I usually use it alongside an FX3 when I'm out filming. I'll let you know if I do end up buying the camera, and you'll start seeing it pop up here on the channel. But if you have any questions about the FX2, if you have any questions about filmmaking in general, let me know down below in the comments. And next, you should check out this video where I dig into story and I go through a 7-step story formula that everyone should know about because it's going to be really helpful when you're out filming your videos. I'll see you over there.